You are so right. I think one of the biggest concerns people have about coming on group trips, and I say this about, any group trips, is I think people worry about going alone, and people worry about going with somebody that they've never met before or gone on a trip before. And I think realistically that is a risk. That, like, I'm not going to deny that. I think there's always risk. People also talk to me about, like, how do you choose who you partner with, and how do you feel about having people come on your trips who you don't know? And everything we do in life, there is a risk associated with what we do. And I think without risk, there's no reward. If I was risk adverse, I would not have started my own business. If I was risk adverse, I would not be hosting group trips in countries other than Australia. If I was risk adverse, I wouldn't be taking groups on trips where I hadn't been to. I just think that it's part of my job and a massive part of my job is to make sure that I feel confident and comfortable with who I'm partnering with on the ground in different countries. And if I don't feel confident or comfortable with my partner, I'm not going to take people there. That would be business suicide. And I am not prepared to put my professional reputation on the line for an experience that could be an absolute disaster. Could it still be a disaster? Absolutely. Things don't go wrong all the time, but things do go wrong. Things are often not what we think they should be, or they might be, or, if you're replicating a trip, having done a similar sort of experience before and you have an idea about how things should be or are going to be, it doesn't mean they're going to be the same. And I think that's an important thing for me to remember as a host, but also for people to realize who are coming on my trips too, is that just because you've heard that somebody had a great trip with me or with another host going to the same or a different place doesn't mean that the experience for you is going to be the same. But what I also think is that we are very quick to go to the negative. We are very quick to say it could be a disaster, or this could go wrong, or that could go wrong. And two things I would say to that. Firstly, is that travel is unpredictable. And that's part of probably what I like about it, because we can have an idea about how things are going to be and what they might be like, and then it could be completely different. But I think the other thing is, I do think that's part of the fun, because then there becomes a problem-solving element, and then sometimes you find that you're doing things that you wouldn't have done otherwise, but you can have just as good an experience, which I think is really cool. The other thing is that rather than going to the negative, what about if it's amazing? What if it is the most amazing experience that you've ever had? What if you meet people that from all around the world that you would have never met? What if you meet people who are like you and have chosen to do this trip together, or chosen to do this trip, and then you go off and choose to do another trip together? What if you have the most life-changing experience because you've actually said yes to yourself and you've said yes to doing something that normally you would say no to? What if it's the best travel experience that you've ever had? What if you really love coming on my trips and you've found somebody who you can confidently travel with forever, like into the future? What if you meet someone who ends up being your best friend? Like, I just think there's so many positives that we don't look for. And I think it's so important when we want to do something that we find a way to kind of talk ourselves into it, because it's so easy to talk ourselves out of it. And I think that's where the risk comes in. Like I said, there's absolutely risk for me, but I think there's also risk for the participants or people who are saying yes to coming on my trips. But there's risk in everything we do. This risk just looks different. And I've done trips before where I've said yes to something and I think, this could be a disaster. Yes, it could be, but it could also be amazing. But I always go into things with the mindset of, okay, this could be a disaster. And if it is, I've got travel insurance. I've got my eSIM, so I'm connected to the world. I've got a credit card or cash in my bank. So if I need to go to plan B, I will. And D, I'm capable. I can, if it's that bad, I can get on a plane and come home. And that would not be the ideal scenario. But as your host, I want to make sure everything is as good as it can be for you to feel confident in coming on the trip. You feel as prepared as you can possibly feel. I've done my risk assessment. I've thought about all the different things that could go wrong, and I do my best to make sure that you have all the information that you need to have prior to a trip to feel confident about coming, but also set you up in a way that if things don't go to plan, you have got things in place. Like, have you got your travel insurance? I know that travel insurance doesn't stop you from getting sick, but it certainly gives you confidence knowing that if something does go wrong, you don't have to be thinking, oh gosh, this is going to cost me so much money. All you're thinking is, get me the help I need. This really sucks and I'm missing out on the trip, but at least I'm covered and at least I'm going to be protected financially, and it's not going to impact things down the track, except that you're going to want to come back and do the trip again because you don't want to miss out. So I think risk, absolutely, but there's got to be risk for the reward. And yeah, I think it's important that we take risks in our life, and that's part of growth. That's part of still learning. That I think particularly as we get older, developing confidence and finding ourselves again, like refinding ourselves. It's something that we forget to do, particularly as we get stuck in a 9 to 5 or we have kids, or it's easy to just keep doing the same thing over and over. But I think it's important that we do try to do different things and step outside our comfort zone.